Hi, my name is Sherilyn Simpson. I am here today to go over how to get your garden started for the growing season. I want to introduce myself from Stillwater, Oklahoma. I'm a Stillwater and OKC graduate from OSU, and I have a homestead. You could hear the animals in the background, so bear with me on that. I also want to forewarn you, I am not a photographer, videographer. This is all brand new to me, so if this video looks wonky, I apologize. I have the bare minimum set up here, so I am doing the best I can with what I'm working with. I am here today. I've had multiple requests. I've seen people on Facebook really just eager to get into gardening, and they have no clue how to get started. There's just so many subjects to go over, but today I just want to at least get you started and getting your garden prepped for this growing season. And when I talk about the growing season, I'm typically talking about right now spring until fall. However, you are welcome to grow year round. It just depends on what you like to grow or interesting in growing. So that being said, there's 3 things you want to consider when you are starting your garden. First of all is the sun and how the sun positions throughout the growing season for your garden to get adequate light. The other thing you want to consider is it close to a good water source? Your garden needs water typically every day throughout the hot season. Because it does, as you know, in Oklahoma, get really hot, and so your plants can stress out for the lack of water. So timing of watering and whatnot all associates with that. The last thing I'm going to go over is prepping your soil and how to determine your soil being adequate for your plants. Throughout this video, I will go over those 3 things more in depth, just so y'all can understand. However, if there's something you have questions over, please feel free to reach out to me. I have a Facebook page. Actually, I have multiple pages. My primary page is Sherilyn Simpson. However, my homesteading page is Fluffy Cow on Facebook. I cover all sorts of stuff on there, crocheting, canning, gardening, just homesteading in general. The first thing I want to go over is understanding the path of your sun direction. Way you can do that is determining every few hours where the sun is located. So the first thing you need to do when you determine sun positioning according to your property, a lot of people use their house, for instance, to join their garden close to their house. Or if you're lucky enough and have a lot more space, you can grow over in that area. You just need to determine where the sun will be located according to that. And what you can do is draw a map of your property, and every few hours during the day, you would draw where that sun versus shade would be located. And that will give you an indication of if that's a good spot to put your garden. There is certain aspects of gardening of certain plants that will take a little more shade than others. That usually is your leafy greens. There are some locations in my garden that has more shade than others, and so a lot of times I will put my leafy greens in that area. But that's during the growing season. In general, leafy greens, your brassicas can't really handle the summer months. So usually, in my space, I typically just wait until the off season to grow all those types of plants. Again, I'm referring to your brassicas, so your broccoli, cauliflower, and then your leafy greens, your kale, your lettuce, your spinach, and whatnot. And I will go over determining that on your seed packets here shortly. So once you determine where you are going to locate your garden, there's certain steps that you need to take in order to get that garden going and it to be successful during the growing season. So obviously this garden needs to be in a location where it's not going to generally move unless you do container gardening. There's different methods of gardening out there. Container gardening, like I mentioned, was one. Raised beds is one, versus in-ground gardening is one. There's aquaponics, which I don't do. I don't really have any knowledge in. My garden is primarily raised beds, only because the reason is my soil is very clayey and it's very hard to dig, much less grow in. It lacks nutrients pretty bad. So I have determined over the years that raised bed gardening is the way to go in my space. The other thing is understanding how much it's going to take to get that garden going. Being the first year, a good start may be to do in-ground gardening. Or if you determine that you do need to do raised bed gardening, maybe starting with a bed or two to get that started. To make sure the space is prepared, there's multiple things you can do. Is tarp that location. I kind of made the mistake that I didn't think I needed to, and even though I laid landscape fabric, it's still a pain in the butt. I fight Bermuda grass consistently in some of my beds. So tarping your location is very, very important to do to be able to kill the grass in that location. So when you tarp, ideally you would like to tarp for at least 6 months in that space. That will give it time to not only kill the grass, but to get your soil prepped so you could till it to get it ready to go. I do want to say be careful of tilling when you have Bermuda grass, because the more you break the Bermuda rhizomes up, the more invasive they're going to get. So pulling by the root of those Bermuda rhizomes will get a lot of that Bermuda up. So ideally when you till, try to get those Bermuda runners out of the ground. When you're killing your grass for your garden, I forewarn you to please stay away from any kind of grass sprays and whatnot. Granted, some are out there marketing that they are ideal around flower beds and whatnot. However, if you're growing vegetables, ideally I would not use any kind of herbicides around that location. If you decide to do raised bed gardening, there's some steps in preparing those beds. It can be very, very expensive to add soil to those beds, because a lot of times my beds are typically about 10 inches to 12 inches high. You need at least a bare minimum of 8 inches to get a good growing crop going for most of your vegetables. So now that you got your bed ready to add the soil, or you've tilled your in-ground garden, there is still some things you want to consider doing before you add your plants. So in our raised beds, I got some pictures that I will show you that I have added just recently. I just did some mineral tubs, as a matter of fact, for some of our pumpkins that we just put in those mineral tubs. You could do a base layer, and it's kind of in the version of lasagna gardening in a sense. And the purpose of that is just not only it helps amend the soil as it breaks down, but it will help you not have to purchase as much soil, because soil is super expensive. If you haven't noticed, I had to go purchase peat moss, as a matter of fact, just the other day, and a bale of it was ridiculous. I remember getting it for like $10 a bale, and I'm talking about big bale. But it's now like $20. It's crazy. And some of your actual soil itself, like Pro Mix that you see at Walmart, that is running over $20, and that's even smaller bale than what the peat moss is. So considerations in that aspect is that they will, when it breaks down, it will help your plants in the long run. So that being said, what you would start with is in your raised bed, or if you have mineral tubs, is a good one. You can't really do it a whole lot in pots so much unless you do little twigs, but you could put logs inside your raised beds. And I have a wood pile. I will currently show you a picture of that. So if you decide to go do a raised bed garden, there's a lot of things you should consider before either purchasing or building. There is so many different versions of raised bed gardening out there. 10 gardens, metal beds, wood beds. A lot of my beds are wood beds. I do have a couple that are sheet metal siding beds that I have built on my own. There is much controversy out there on wood that you should use on your raised beds, like treated versus not treated wood. The big thing with treated wood, and it's not so much now, is that the treated wood, the chemicals that they use to spray the wood to treat it, had cyanide in it. And a lot of your plants that you are eating, the cyanide would get uptake from those plants, and there was concern that it was affecting the food supply in your garden. However, it's not so much an issue anymore. I have pressure treated raised beds. I don't have any issues with it. It doesn't alter the taste of the food, anything like that. I will produce some pictures and videos of some of my beds that I grow in and what I do grow in, because I do consider what I am putting in that item or bed to grow. Example is I have tires that I've obtained over the years from our vehicles, and I just use them and repurpose them for flower beds. But that being said, for tires, I only grow flowers because I am concerned about it being in the rubber beds, that it could contaminate our food. So I typically just stay in our wood beds. The wood pile, I get little pieces of logs and will line the bottom of my raised beds and just get them like completely covered at the very bottom. If you look at several videos on YouTube or whatnot, they're prime examples that will better give you an understanding of that. But this is just the start of just the basic teaching you how to get it going. But you could start with logs, and then typically you could do like a leaf, dead leaves, dead grass, wheat, hay, any kind of grass bale. It doesn't matter as long as it's, again, not treated with pesticides and whatnot. You gotta really be considerate of that. After you got that down, then you can add your soil. Now when you add your soil, you can add about 6 to 8 inches in your bed. That would be ideal to, again, have enough soil for your plants to survive in. And as you continue every year, you would add extra soil to your beds to amend those nutrients into the soil for your new plants to get in. So you would replenish that by adding soil each year to that raised bed. So in this section, I am now going to explain to you how to determine what you want to grow. So this is the fun part. This is just like going to the candy store and determining what you want to grow. So you could go online and purchase a lot of your seeds. Another place that you can look is, Tractor Supply, Walmart, your general locations. We have an Atwoods here. That's a farm and ranch store. It's similar to Tractor Supply. However, online, good places is rareseeds.com. That's also referred to as Baker Creek. They're out of Missouri. I love them. I can't get enough of them. It's on my bucket list to go to their store because, oh my gosh, I would go nuts in that place. It has dozens and dozens of seeds. The great thing about them, and I can't think of them enough, is that they are not only heirloom seeds, and I will go over that in a different video. However, they have seeds that you would not even imagine of heard of from like all over the world. They are amazing. They have such a Bible book that's about this thick of seeds of vegetables and flowers, all sorts of varieties that you could choose from. So one catalog that I do have is Gurney's. They're another one that I've purchased seeds from. You would also hear from Johnny Seeds is another one. But there are so many locations and places online that you can get seeds from. The other place I have, Stillwater Milling. They have a load of seeds that are very, very cheap. I have seeds from them that I purchased for $1 that I've had for several years because I don't plant them all. But they have a loaded pack in there, a variety of seeds. They also pay attention to people that have larger land that they could grow a whole lot more on. So keep that in mind. For now, I am going to use the Gurney's catalog. It's just so much easier to handle while I'm doing this video to show you how to kind of determine what seeds to get. So in general, when you get your packet, you kind of have to have in mind what exactly you want to grow. So for instance, I love growing tomatoes. So I know I can go to the tomato section and find me some tomatoes. The problem with that though is there is variety of so much variety of tomatoes. and they're in different classifications. And again, this is some broad subject that you can go on and on and on about, but you could keep in mind what you are going to use that tomato for. For instance, I like to use slicers for my sandwiches. I also want to grow some for sauces. That will determine what varieties you should be growing. So currently in this video, I will go over tomatoes section in the catalog just to kind of get a generalization of explaining to you what varieties to pick from. Every vegetable has a bunch of varieties and what they are used for, and it can be very overwhelming and very, very confusing. But in general, when you're going through the catalog, you want to keep in mind what you are going to eat. Or if you're growing for somebody else wants a particular item. For instance, I found out last year that I had such an influx of people wanting cucumbers. I grow cucumbers because I like fresh cucumbers. However, I don't really care for pickling cucumbers. But my mother-in-law does, so I grow pickling cucumbers versus slicing cucumbers that you can use in salads. You're going through your catalog. I usually get my catalogs about January, February, and again, it kind of gives me an idea, gives me time before the growing season starts. You want to purchase your seeds pretty early. That being said, because most varieties of seeds or vegetables, you want to start indoors to get ahead of the growing season. There is multiple locations online that you can go to google.com to refer to where your zone is, to where you live. Zones are locations of your growing season, so that will determine when your last frost date is. Here in Oklahoma, we have two different zones. The northern zone is typically 7A. The southern zone is usually 7B. But keep in mind, there has been recent changes to that. So you want to stay current with that. Our seasons are changing every year and whatnot. So again, zones are typically referred to as when you want to start your plants outside. And I say start your plants, transplant your seedlings outside. So I was getting picked on the other day because I was going around with my meat thermometer to my garden to determine if it's a good time to plant. Thing is you may think a day or two you may get warm season or warm weather, and how Oklahoma is bipolar in the springtime and it fluctuates so much. So what you do is you'll go to your soil with some kind of thermometer and stick it in the ground, and typically you want your soil to be 55 degrees or more, and it remain consistent temperature wise outside. Determine your weather outside, how consistent the temperatures is going to be. Typically April 15th is our last frost date, so you usually can't plant until after that. However, this year we've had a weird weather pattern where we've had some storms, but then it just really gets super cold. So you really want to determine that by keeping track of your weather. If your lows are remaining consistent and your highs are remaining consistent above, I say 40 degrees, you can usually transplant your seedlings outside. Okay, so we got our catalog, and we are going to go over these instructions on the bottom of, again, determining what varieties you want to grow. So these tomatoes, for instance, are cherry tomatoes. I have a love-hate relationship with cherry tomatoes. They are the bane of my existence, and you can ask my mother-in-law. She had some the last few years, and I finally have convinced her this year not to grow them. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about them. They're just not my type, a cup of tea in a sense, just because they grow so much and you can't keep up with them. And my mother-in-law wanted them for salsas, and I was like, no, no more. So I am growing tomatoes for her this year, and I'm growing the bigger slicers, the Amish paste, sauces, all that stuff for her this year, because she won't have a say in it now. So in the catalog, we are going to look at the Girl's Best Hybrid here. I'm going to explain this to you. And what it is when you're reading your catalog, you are going to usually get a back history about that variety. And it's important because that explains generally what that variety was used for. Again, tomatoes, there's different versions, slicers that you can use, or on sandwiches. I refer to the Amish paste. You can use that for salsas or tomato sauce. But generally it starts with a background on that variety. And it will also tell you generally how big those tomatoes get. Some of these varieties have been bred to grow massive tomatoes. I'm not generally in that realm of things because I think it's very stressful to the plant to have giant tomatoes. But whatever floats your boat. For me, the store-bought size tomatoes is generally what I go for. Okay, we're going to go through this catalog. I'm going to concentrate on this Girl's Best Hybrid here. So usually it will give you a backstory on how this plant or tomato is used, if it was used for salsas versus if it was used for sandwiches. Some people like to use it for salads and whatnot, so that is a good idea to keep in mind. The other thing it's going to tell you is the size of the tomatoes. There are some varieties out there that the tomatoes just get massive, which is great, but typically I like to get the store bought size because they're just easier to manage and keep in my freezers if I need to use them for salsas or tomato sauce and whatnot. It just depends on what your focus is on. So this Girl's Best Hybrid typically will get, it will tell you about 8 ounces on here and whatnot. So they don't get very, very big. So this would be a good plant that I would like. It would also explain to you in bold letters if it's a good one to use for sandwiches or salsas or whatnot. I am not going to go great in depth on a lot of this. I am just going through this to help with actual beginners to understand what to purchase, so they're not purchasing something that they don't need or they found out that is a failure in their area. Tomatoes in general, they will have a description on here if it's an indeterminate versus determinate. Some of these varieties, when they're determinate, will only grow so high. The indeterminate will grow tall, super tall. There's no determinate height on those plants. The determinate ones usually get about 2 to 4. I've seen some as high as close to 5 foot. However, they don't get very big. They grow more of a bush. Last and not least, or if not least, down here we'll explain to you how long it will take to grow. So, in this instance, the very last thing is 75 days. So, that is the time of when you plant that seed to harvest, is how long that plant needs to grow. So, there's some varieties could grow longer than that, to like 90 days before you can get a harvest. But in general, tomatoes grow about 60 to 80 days time frame. That is enough a lot of times for you to be able to start your plants outside. However, for me, I like to start seeds inside for tomatoes, just to get a head start on that growing season, and that also determines the length of harvest that you will get from that plant. So this company, they offer, here at the bottom, they explain, they offer seed packets versus seed starts. Seed packets are just little seeds that come in a packet, just like you get at Walmart. On the little, bunch of seeds, that variety that you could choose from, they come in those little packets. Your seed starts, however, are usually in the gardening center that you can go outside and purchase from the store. Lowe's is another example where you can go into the garden center and usually purchase a lot of your seed starts. That is fine. However, it's again what your price is. Your seed starts are usually going to be cheaper just because you have multiple seeds, more seeds that you need to get your plants started. Some people just don't have the funds to purchase actual seed starts. The seed starts, some of those, if you get 6 in a pack, can be close to $5 to $10. And that can be expensive, especially if you're trying to grow multiple varieties. So now we have our seed packets that we purchased from the store, and so I will go into depth about what is on the back here that will help you out on how to plant these seeds. Here, I'm going to start here at the bottom because this can be very, very intimidating and can be misleading. Some of these are not accurate in my opinion, in my experience. So usually you would determine a lot of times what your zone is and what you can grow. So for instance, this is a bean, green bean in a sense. So this one is a warm season plant. So you want to grow it during the summer months. It will flourish during the summer months. So on here it says April to August. However, my beans usually I don't start until the peak of summer, like June, end of June into July, just because they do a whole lot better in your soil. So this can sometimes be a little misleading on some of these varieties that will tell you, like your brassicas sometimes will have this and say that you can plant these between April and August. Well, the problem is usually brassicas are better in the cooler months. Burpee is another one I did not mention earlier, is a pretty good one. There's some people that really love them, some people that don't really care for them, but some of their seeds are pretty good. I have no issues with them. Every seed company is different on what they carry. This is a general one that a lot of them do carry, the Kentucky Wonder. However, Baker Creek, they have some varieties that you can't purchase anywhere else. I've noticed my favorite from them is the Dragon Tongue Bean, just because the bean itself is yellowish with purple on them, and it's really, really neat. and it doesn't affect the taste of that bean. So, and then I also grow some other varieties. There's a purple green bean that I really love growing, and it's funny because when you cook them, they turn green. It doesn't affect anything about them. So when you start, it will tell you here if it's full sun. I'm sorry, it's blurry. It's adjusting. Full sun, how far apart you would want to plant them, harvest time at 65 days, how deep you are going to plant those seeds. And then it will give you general instructions on how to plant that particular seed. So keep in mind, this is a bigger seed versus your broccoli are just itty bitty tiny seeds. So this one's going to be plugged into the ground deeper versus this one you just sprinkle across the top and just rake lightly over your soil is how you would plant them. Find what seeds you can grow as a seed start versus you have to start them in the ground. So brassicas, for instance, are very, very good, easy to transplant into the garden once you get the seed starts going. They flourish better that way. Not to say that you can't plant them in the ground. As a matter of fact, my brassicas right now, my cauliflower and my broccoli were sown directly into the ground, and they're 6 inches high, and they do great. But you got to plant them in the ground again before it gets too hot, or they would what they call bolt. And when they bolt, they become really bitter and hard to eat, and they will start to flower, and that's how you know they're bolting. Green beans, for instance, they're not good to transplant. So green beans typically you would grow directly into the ground. You wouldn't start them indoors. You would start them outside, and that's kind of why I wait until the middle of the growing season to plant these and whatnot. Now, when you, for instance, want green beans, you can do multiple harvests. Not to say that you couldn't do green beans, say start now, and then get a harvest in about 60 days, and then replant or succession plant another plot to get another bunch of peas or green beans. So what I mean by succession planting is you could start these type, I'm just using green beans as an example. You could start these and get them going, and then say in about a month out you would do another planting of green beans, and that way you get multiple harvests from these plants. I kind of want to back up a little bit when it comes to harvesting and what we were determining what we wanted to eat. So when I'm talking about is that what are you going to do with those plants? So there's different methods of harvesting those plants and saving them for the winter. So you can make all sorts of recipes when it comes to canning, or are you going to freeze them? Are you going to eat them fresh? The thing is, eating them fresh is you may get tired of having so many tomatoes. So you kind of have to keep in mind what or how much you're going to get from that plant, and what are you going to do with that harvest. I am also fortunate to have a freeze dryer, so some of my plants I like to freeze dry to keep them longer for different recipes. Another method is dehydration. I do keep a dehydrator typically for my herbs or my leafy greens. They survive, or they do well in the dehydrator, and it's less cost effective to do that. Okay, so we are now to the point of caring for your garden. So once you get your seedlings in, That doesn't mean, okay, now I have to wait for the harvest. So as you're putting seedlings to ground, you want to fertilize that plot. A lot of times I will get some fertilizer, throw it in the hole, mix the hole up a little bit, and then put the plant in and fill it in. Just because you add amendments to your soil doesn't mean it doesn't need fertilizer. There's different types of fertilizers. Again, that can be overwhelming. Just keep in mind there's two beneficial types of fertilizers. There is multiple controversies on variety of things. Like I was mentioning earlier, your pressure treated wood versus synthetic fertilizers. What insecticides you can use in your garden that is beneficial of getting rid of the harmful bugs, but keeping the beneficial bugs into your garden. In my vegetable garden, I do keep a variety of vegetables, but I do have a variety of flowers. I have some hibiscus. I have marigolds. I have lilies. I have a vining plant. I can't remember the name of it. Anyways, but it flowers to attract some of the beneficial insects. So keep that in mind. However, there's some insects that, for instance, I battle the squash bugs and squash vine borers. They are the bane of my existence. And I hate to say it, but I'm glad to know that a lot of other people struggle with that. And that's a total different subject. But just keep in mind, how are you going to maintain your garden when it comes to insects and other pests and diseases. When I speak diseases, tomatoes can get blight very easy when you get a very, very rainy season. It's just a fungus that comes out of the soil. Your watermelon plants, or even your squash plants, your big leafy plants, they can get molds on them, on the leaves. As your growing season's going, maintaining your garden will help your plants flourish. For instance, keeping the weed population down. It can be very, very exhausting a lot of times trying to keep those weeds down. There's very different methods you can do that to help with that. For instance, mulching your beds not only helps with the weed population, but it will help keep moisture in your soil, so you're not having to water as often or as much. When it comes to watering, I have actually a timer on my water hose. So I like to water in the middle of the night, for instance. So I have it set, say, at, I don't know, midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning, because our household, we have enough people in this house, and running a bunch of water off of a well can be very stressful. So I like to rotate to, water at night. Plus, at night, it's not as hot, and it's not a chance for the water to evaporate. There's controversy out there when to water, watering in the morning versus watering at night. Is either one is ideal, in my opinion. There's other controversies on how to water, hand watering versus irrigation, versus just overhead sprinklers. I use overhead sprinklers just because for me it's just cost effective in that instance. Some people don't have the funds, again, to do all that. There's gardeners that have like raised beds, for instance, and they have irrigation to each of those beds, which is like luxury in my opinion. But I don't have the means to do that, and make it easier, I just overhead garden or water, excuse me. There's different mulches that you can use. You could use wood chips. When it comes to wood chips, though, just be careful and really read the bag. It will tell you if there's dyes in that sense in the wood chips. So your colors, black, the reds, there's a variety of colors, I'm sure. But you don't want any of them that are treated with coloring. It will tell you that it's not beneficial or ideal for, vegetables because the chemicals and whatnot. You could use leaves. I know you could use hay, wheat straw, and whatnot. I try to stay away from those typically because unless the straw has been aged, meaning sitting for a long period of time, I it to me it just introduced more weeds to the garden and whatnot. So just pay attention to that. I didn't really go into detail about how I got into gardening in a sense. My grandmother, my mom's mom, was an avid gardener. She was mentioned as the azalea queen, if you would say. She loved her azaleas. She planted them for her church. Family members that passed away, she would plant for them. For a husband or a wife that passed away, she would plant one for that spouse in remembrance of that person. She just loved them. And so I learned a lot of the gardening from her. And one of the things that I still use today that I really, really love is, I think, like the craziest thing, is using carpet. I use it in my walkways. So when weeds become a problem, I'll just flip the carpet over and then, alternate. And it helps with weed eating a lot of my walkways. I don't typically put the carpet per se inside the garden itself, just because it could smother the plants. But I just use it to keep my walkways weed free. So, lastly, when it comes to your garden, once the growing season has gone through, there's things that you can do to prepare it for the next growing season. Um, Cleaning the old debris out. This would be your opportunity to even start a compost pile, an area where you can put all that debris and allow it to break down. Your compost pile could take a lot of stuff, old, soiled vegetables, fruits that you don't even eat. You could throw it in your compost pile, grass clippings, and whatnot. And mixing it every so often will help with breaking down. That is free soil for you in the long run to put in your flower beds or even your vegetable garden. That being said, when it comes to this video, I wanted to concentrate primarily on vegetable garden. However, a lot of this does pertain to flower gardening. It's a whole lot of no different, just getting it started. To have your garden become successful through the year. So it's at the end of your growing season, and when it comes to cleaning out your garden, you want to put some mulch down to keep the soil from leaching over the winter with the snow and ice that we get. Leaching is basically all your nutrients flowing out of the soil, and you lose that for your plants for the next growing season. So some people, when it comes to, for instance, raised beds, and you could do this for in-ground gardening too, I guess, where you could, again, tarp it and cover it up. A lot of people can also use leaves. Again, any kind of type of mulch will work. The whole idea between mulching your soil or your beds is to keep the soil moist. You don't want it dripping wet, obviously, but what I like to do is if we hadn't gotten rain in a week or so, I will turn on my sprinklers for a little bit just to help with the soil. This is also beneficial because when it comes to your next growing season, you keep your soil moist. It's so much easier to plant in versus a super dry soil that you're having to get rehydrated again. So hopefully this video wasn't a super long video. I just wanted to go over the basics of getting your gardens going for the growing season. I hope and pray that you guys enjoy this video, and I will take any input of, if there's some subjects that I didn't cover, please feel free to reach out to me. I plan on keeping up on some of these videos and getting a little more in depth in some of these subjects for you all, just to help spread my knowledge out there to y'all. I hope you all have a good day, and we'll see you in a little bit. Bye.